Chapter 3. A terrible screaming split the serene night sky on the outskirts of San Dimas as a telephone booth hurtled through the darkness like a missile, trailing sparks in its wake. Abruptly, it slowed, heaved itself upright and dropped, plummeting like an elevator out of control, toward the parking lot of a Circle K convenience store. It hit the ground, narrowly missing a cat, which leapt into the air in alarm, then yowled out into the darkness. The door of the booth slid open, and Evil Bill and Evil Ted stepped out. "Whoa," said Evil Bill. "Not bad. Right on target, dude. Now to work some totally triumphant, heinous evil. They don't call us Evil Bill and Evil Ted for nothing. So, what do you think we should do now? Better report to the master, dude." "Yeah." Evil Ted slapped the back of his head, and his right eye popped out of his head and fell into the palm of his hand. "We've arrived, dude." The electronic eye began to glow and shimmer. Then there was a burst of static across the pupil. Then Denomolos's image appeared, as if on the screen of a tiny TV set. "Is Rufus with you?" he demanded. Evil Bill and Evil Ted looked around. The antenna of the booth was slightly damaged, a sign that Rufus must have held on until the warp speed of both shook him off. "Looks like we lost him," said Evil Bill. "Yeah, he's somewhere out there in the circuits of time." Denomolo seemed to relax. "That is very good news. If he's trapped in the circuits, then he's gone forever." "Excellent," said Evil Bill and Evil Ted. "Now," spat Denomolos, "the first act of business. Destroy the ridiculous, insipid band." "You got it, dude." "Get to work," ordered Denomolos. His image vanished from Evil Ted's eye, and the robot poked the eyeball back into his socket and blinked as if to get it to working again. "Phase 1 is about to begin, Evil Bill." "Yeah, they truly will never know what hit them." They stepped back into the phone booth and, for once, used it for the purposes it was designed for. They made a phone call. Before dialing, though, Ted said, "Let me make sure this program is working, dude." He cleared his throat as if he were about to sing. "Be excellent to one another and party on." "Not," said Bill. Both of them were speaking in the voices of Joanna and Elizabeth, perfect, soft English accents, which sounded kind of strange coming out of the mouths of two guys. "That Denomolos is one smart dude," said Bill in Elizabeth's voice. "Truly resplendent," answered Joanna. "Make the call, dude." The real Bill answered. "Hi, Bill," said Evil Ted. "This is Joanna." Bill was mystified. "Joanna, you just drove away. How'd you get home so fast?" "It is not important, but this is. Listen carefully. Elizabeth and I have totally talked it over, and we have decided we are quitting the Wild Stallions." A number of Bill's past lives seemed to shoot past his eyes. He felt dizzy and sick to his stomach. "What? Why?" Ted pressed his ear against the earpiece of the phone and listened in amazement. "Elizabeth and I think you're total losers, and we never want to see you again." "No way!" exclaimed Ted. He didn't feel so hot himself, and his symptoms were remarkably similar to Bill's. Elizabeth's voice came on the line. "We're leaving you forever. We are going to the desert to be alone and to try to forget we ever knew you." "But," protested Bill. "It's over," said Joanna. "Goodbye." The receiver was replaced firmly, and the line died just about the same time Bill and Ted's entire world expired. Eyes glazed over, they sunk down into the couch, unable to believe what they had heard. "Maybe," stammered Ted, "maybe we should have proposed to him sooner." "How could we, Ted? We could barely afford our own apartment, never mind babes and babies." They hung their heads dejectedly, sadder than they had ever been before in their short, active lives. Bill more or less summed it up. "This is most non-heinous." "What are we gonna do?" said Ted plaintively. "We can't just give up, just like that. We gotta find them. We gotta talk to them." "How?" "They said they were gonna be at the desert. The desert is a truly large place." As the enormity of the disaster that had befallen them began to sink in, they felt the weight of the world on their shoulders. It seemed to push them further into the cushions of the couch. Nothing, it seemed, could be worse than this. Nothing. Evil Bill and Evil Ted, on the other hand, were ecstatic, delighted with the evil they had wrought. That was, after all, what they had been programmed for. "Whoa, dude," said Evil Bill. "We totally fooled those other us's." "Yeah, they're completely brilliant," said Evil Ted. Then, in unison, they added gleefully, "Not!" There were a few seconds of spirited air guitar. "Okay," said Evil Bill. "Let's lose the phone booth and start phase 2. Evil Ted gave a thumbs up. "Station, dude." Bill and Ted, the real Bill and Ted, experienced a rush of hope when they heard their doorbell ring. Maybe the soft chimes would awaken them from the nightmare the evening had become. "Maybe it's them. Maybe they were just," said Bill. "Yeah, maybe they were just playing a trick to see if our love was true. Or maybe it was a mistake. Get the door, dude." Bill wrenched open the door, and his jaw dropped so low it almost clanged on the floor. He was looking at himself and Ted. He didn't know yet that there were some fundamental differences at play here. "How's it going, Bill and Ted?" asked Evil Bill and Evil Ted amiably. "Ted, it's us, again." Bill and Ted looked wide-eyed at each other. Very softly they said, "Whoa." Serious and solemn, Bill shook hands with himself, which is a pretty strange feeling. "How's it going, Bill?" "Not bad," said Evil Bill amiably. "You?" "Bad, dude. Real bad." Evil Bill and Evil Ted nodded understandingly. They actually seemed to pity Good Bill and Good Ted. They were programmed to be good, insincere actors. "I think I see all the signs here of babe trouble," said Evil Ted. "Totally heinous babe trouble, Ted," said Ted. "Well, we came to help you guys in your most unfortunate, non-resplendent situation," said Evil Bill. "How?" "Come with us," said Evil Ted. "We'll show you." "Just a minute," said Ted. "Excuse us a minute, will you, future dudes?" Bill and Ted huddled in the corner of the living room. "Dude," Ted whispered, "I got a weird feeling here." "Why?" "We said we were going to help us. It's just the kind of thing we'd do for us." "I don't know. How do we know these guys are really us? I mean, we don't actually know us." They looked over at the two evil ones, who were sitting on the couch helping themselves to the food and drinks left over from the party. "They look like us," said Bill, "and they act like us, and they know we have most heinous trouble with the princesses." "I don't know," said Ted. "It seems kind of strange to me." "Ted, we've been through this before. If it wasn't for that previous intervention of our future selves, would we have passed history? Think of it, dude. We might still be in high school if it wasn't for us. We wouldn't even be where we are today, would we?" "No," said Ted. "And we never would have met the babes. Never mind getting engaged to them, would we? I mean, I admit it. It wasn't a long engagement, but it never would have happened if it hadn't been for us, would it? Without our intervention last time, would we have ever had a most excellent adventure through time?" "No," said Ted, "but I still think we should give him some kind of test." "Okay, you do it." Ted walked over to Evil Ted. "Okay, Ted, if you're really me, how many fingers am I about to hold up?" "3, said Evil Ted. Good Ted looked at his hand as if it had a mind of its own, and sure enough, 3 fingers popped up. Ted stared at them for a minute and then brightened. "Whoa, me, was right." "Excellent," said Bill. "They're on the level." "Of course we are, dude," said Evil Bill. "Would we lie to us?" All 4 of them said, "No way," and air guitared their way out of the door. Evil Bill and Evil Ted looked exactly like Good Bill and Good Ted, but there were some subtle differences that they noticed right away. Evil Ted was driving the Wild Stallion's van, pushing the old heap to the limit, driving recklessly and fast, zooming through the quiet night streets of San Dimas, headed for the desert. Bill and Ted were in the back seat, a little in awe of their other selves. "I had no idea I was a reckless driver," said Ted, unhappily. "I'm gonna have to watch that." "I'm cold," said Bill. "Yeah," said Ted. "Me too. Hey, Bill, Ted, could we have the heater on back here?" Evil Bill turned in the front passenger seat and looked at him sharply. "Shut up, Bill." Bill and Ted were shocked that they would treat themselves with such lack of manners. They stared, mouths agape. "Whoa, that you is a real jerk," said Ted. "Yeah, I gotta remember to be more considerate toward myself when I become him." "He said shut your holes," yelled Evil Ted, not taking his eyes off the road. Ted had had enough from himself. He leaned forward in direct confrontation with Evil Ted. "What's your problem, dude?" "I'm not interested in your insipid jabbering, you despicable insect." "Well, excuse me, Ted," said Ted, his eyes bugging out in surprise and shock at the way he was treating himself. He was also astonished to learn that he knew the word insipid. Bill realized they were in the middle of a potentially volatile situation, not to mention dangerous. The angrier the other Ted got, the faster and more wildly he drove. It made sense to Bill to try to calm things down, even if it meant dealing with two jerks like themselves. "Hey," said Bill brightly, "maybe we should stop for some food and talk this." Evil Bill turned around in his seat, his eyes burning with fury. "Shut your rotting, stinking heads, vermin!" The heat of his anger instantly cowed Bill and Ted. They sunk down in their seats, their shoulders sagging, as if they were trying to make themselves inconspicuous as possible. "Dude," said Ted quietly, "I got a very bad feeling." Dawn was breaking when Evil Ted turned the van off the road and drove out into the desert. The brown, parched earth seemed to stretch for miles in every direction, unrelieved by any distinguishing features. But Evil Ted seemed to know exactly where they were headed. After 20 dusty miles, some outcroppings of rock appeared on the horizon and grew in size as the van neared. They were making straight for them. Excuse me," said Bill, "but you think you dudes might like to tell us where we're going?" "No," snarled Evil Bill. "We dudes wouldn't." "Oh," said Bill. Through the long night ride, Ted had been doing some totally serious thinking, and he had come to some conclusions. He was not happy about them. "Dude," he whispered to Bill, "what if these are evil robot us's from the future, sent here to kill us and replace us?" Bill's answer was emphatic. "Ted, if that were true, it would just be the beginning of a most bogus journey." It was, in fact, the end of a most bogus journey. High in the hills, the van screeched to a halt in a cloud of dust. "Out!" ordered Evil Bill. Bill and Ted slid back the van door and climbed out slowly, blinking in the sunlight. Bill still had one little shred of hope left. "So," he asked, "where are Joanna and Elizabeth?" "They're not here," said Evil Ted. "Yeah," said Evil Bill, "we lied. Here's the truth. We're totally gonna kill you." "No way," said Bill and Ted. "Yes way, dudes," said Evil Ted. "We're fully programmed to do it." "Yeah," said Evil Bill happily. "Not only that, we want to do it too." This was too much for Bill to take. He stepped forward and punched himself hard in the jaw. "You jerk, Bill!" His knuckles crunched on Evil Bill's face, and he fell back, burying his fists in his stomach. "Ow! You're metal, dude!" Evil Bill chuckled. "I know. Check it out." He ripped open his chest, and Bill and Ted stared at the wild tangle of wires and circuits that pulsed under the steel. "Oh!" Evil Ted and Evil Bill were so delighted with their sheer evilness that they couldn't help themselves. They jumped and bobbed and weaved in a wild, exuberant air guitar. Electric music twanged out and echoed in the rocks. Then they stopped and turned grimly to their two captives. "Let's go," they ordered. "Bogus," said Bill and Ted. Evil Bill and Evil Ted pushed them toward the edge of the cliff. Bill and Ted looked over the ledge and paled. "Dude," said Ted, his voice quavering, "this is a totally high cliff. We gotta try something. Anything." Evil Ted nudged Ted toward the void. "Later, dude," he said with a grin. "Wait," said Ted. "Dudes, even though you're doing this, you should know. Bill? Yeah, we love you." "Yeah," said Ted, relieved. "That's it. We love you." Evil Bill and Evil Ted exchanged glances, rolled their eyes, and smiled cruelly. "Wimps," they spat. Then they pushed them hard. Bill and Ted never had a chance. They went over the edge, plummeting helplessly into space, their arms and legs windmilling, their wide eyes filled with fear. "No way!" they shrieked as they fell, the ground seeming to rush up to meet them. Their screams echoed through the canyon, caroming off the rocks. Evil Bill and Evil Ted stood at the edge of the cliff and watched with satisfaction as Good Bill and Good Ted dropped toward their doom. The screams grew more terrified as they grew fainter. Then far off, at the bottom of the canyon, came two quick, sickening thumps as Bill and Ted hit hard. "Excellent," said Evil Bill and Evil Ted. They high-fived and air-guitared and then headed for the van. "Wait," said Evil Bill. "How about a round of loogies?" "Excellent idea, dude." Evil Bill and Evil Ted returned to the edge of the cliff and very carefully, with precise aim, dropped two long, ropey skeins of spittle over the side. "Whoa," said Bill. I totally loogied on the good dead me. Yeah, yelled Evil Ted. We're fully evil robots. Yeah, said Evil Bill, breaking into a spirited air guitar. Hey, I've got a great idea, said Evil Ted. Let's hear it, dude. Let's dump the van. We'll head back the highway and steal us a good car. A Porsche. Yeah, excellent.